The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Agile Coaching Network. This is episode 93. Today, we're going to talk about layoffs and organizational change. It seems timely because I know that I've had a number of my friends and colleagues and people reaching out on LinkedIn are all trying to go maneuver this latest round of tech layoffs. We're going to get into those questions in a second. If this is your first time to the Agile Coaching Network, I'm joined by a set of hosts, which includes Shauna, Diana, Jorg, Sheila Eckhart, Sheila McGrath, and Hendrik Gesser. We're here to get the conversation going. We offer our insights as being in Agile for a number of years. We want to hear all perspectives. We want to hear people who are just brand new to Agile. You're new to coaching. You're new to the whole thing of what are those principles out there that everyone keeps talking about. That's okay. We want to still hear that perspective as we go through and talk about the things that we are dealing with as Agile coaches, as well as leaders within our companies. You can go up to any of your favorite podcast systems and you can find the ACN podcast on there, and you're welcome to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, the love button, whatever the little emoji is there that lets people know that, hey, this is something that they should pay attention to. And for the people who've done the referrals, and we're now listened to in over 119 countries, that's really great. Whether or not you're sitting over in the UK or you're sitting over in India or in other parts of the world, it's really cool to see that we've gotten that much support. Also, you can become a supporting member of our podcast as well as this session. The supporting members that provide us along with our sponsors gives us the ability to pay for the show, meaning we've got fees that go out for things like the webinar system and our websites and everything else. If you go to acnpodcast.org, we appreciate if you just want to do a one-time donation, you can go do it. Or in the event that you want to become a supporting member of New Agility, which is the company that actually is the producer of the show, you're welcome to go do that as well. Plus also the sponsors like the Agile Alliance and all the others that are there, you can go see them on the ACN podcast website. Go support those people too and let them know that you heard about them from the ACN podcast. We want to amplify the fun and learning that we have in the Agile community. Agile community is one of the most warm, and I think of all the supporting communities that I've been a part of, this group of people are absolutely the best. So layoffs. Yeah, as I said in the opening, I've had a number of friends reach out, people, acquaintances on LinkedIn. People are reaching out and asking for advice. I know I've had bigger companies like Intel Corporation laying off 15,000, and then of course, in the supply chain of things like Cisco and then Dell and then others start to follow suit. But if you think about the fact company, and I'll just pick on Intel because I used to work for them for 32 years, a company like Intel that loses, I think, pretty close to 10 to 15% of its employees were let go. That's a sizable chunk of people that are no longer there. And I can tell you that looking at that situation, there's two perspectives that take place in that. One is the perspective of you're the person, unfortunately, that was let go, and you are now in an area that you're going to have to go maneuver. You might not have the luxury of taking a lot of time off, and you're now having to go search for a new job. Also in that whole aspect is you're the one who's still at the company. You didn't get laid off, but yet you have less people to do the things that you were doing before. And the question of whether, and I don't know if I've seen companies do this before, actually. Some companies will say the workload hasn't changed. You still have the same things and the same delivery timelines and all that. You're just going to have to do it now with the help of AI. No, I say that jokingly, but there are probably some leaders out there that think AI will replace some of those people. And others will just say, look, how the heck am I going to get this work done? And so if you look at from the impact of the companies, and I've seen this, the morale and the engagement of people where they're suddenly saying, if it happened to that individual, why isn't it going to happen to me? Or if something else goes on, and the engagement and the workload and everything else builds into it. Operational disruptions, as I talked about, as well as just cultural impact. And again, not to pick on Intel again, but I left Intel right after a large layoff back in 2016, I think it was. That was their very first layoff. And I've been keeping track of my old family members within the company, and the cultural impact of having that layoff has actually spanned right now almost a decade of the impact it had on the company culture. Prior to that layoff, they only did what were called redeployments, meaning that Andy Grove had inside of his brain that the single biggest asset that they had were the people. And the people, it took a lot to go create an engineer that can go work in semiconductors. And if you let that go, then you're going to have to go at a future time, you're going to have to then retrain somebody, and you just can't train somebody overnight. I think the estimate was at the time that it took about 3 to 5 years for somebody to become proficient in the work that they were doing, which is incredibly expensive if you think about it. And then, of course, team and leadership challenges that happen. How do leaders continue to help the teams to continue to prosper and grow, even though that you might have less people around to get the jobs done? And those are some of the key challenges. And I'm curious, if you're in a company that just had a layoff and you're one of the people that have been left behind, what's also maybe something you would add to this list? The other half of it, as I talked about, which is the person who is now unemployed, and they are now looking at the financial strain, the emotional and psychological impact, that self-identity that you would have. I could tell you, for as long as I was with the one company for that long, there was a lot of my identity that was wrapped into my position, my company that I worked for, all of that. And you get in a number of years in a company and then suddenly you're now separated from that. There is a little bit of self-identity challenges that people go through. The career and, of course, professional challenges. There's a lot of people applying for the same jobs. And how do you stand out in order to get that interview? I'd love to hear perspectives of people about how they're taking on those challenges and some advice you can give to some of the people that are currently right now impacted by layoffs. And then again, just how do you go seek and get that new position, which I think is really a challenge. So to kick us off on the questions, as I said, with the two different perspectives, I'd like to hear people, what are some of the steps you can take if you're let go from a company? What advice could you give somebody who is right now looking for a new position? What are some of the key things that you can say, you should try these things, or these places that you might want to go to, these types of meetup groups, or whatever it is? I'd love to hear your advice in this area. The next one is as a coach and a leader, and if you're still in the company that's just dealing with a layoff, what steps can you take to soften the impact within your company? To kick us off, Diane, you have not been here for a few episodes. Do you want to go ahead and take a stab at this?
Yeah. Yes, I do. I have a lot of people know things about my background. Something that you might not know about my background was in the dot-com bust era, and just before, leading up to it, my consulting practice took a big nosedive. At that time, I had already been consulting for about 10 years, but my consulting practice took a big nosedive. And I ended up being hired by an outplacement firm to manage outplacement centers. And I managed 3 different centers in 3 different locations. And so our job was to help people find new roles, new positions, new next identities, all of those things that you were talking about. But then also to help the company. And in particular, my role, in addition to supporting the career counselors and everybody who was helping the folks who needed to find their next thing, I also had a role in helping managers have those conversations. And if you think about 15,000 people being laid off from one of the really big companies, And you think of a span of direct reports as maybe an average of 10. It could be more, could be less, but say that's 1,500 managers who have the stress of having that conversation. While it's hugely stressful for the people who get laid off, and I certainly don't want to diminish that at all. It's hugely stressful. There is that lingering impact with the folks who stay. Not only the folks who stay from the categories who are, I don't know what they call them, that's not targeted, but whatever, but also from the folks who have to manage that, the people in leadership roles, the stress of that. It is a broadly stressful impact. And I think we don't always think about how it goes way beyond even the folks who are actually notified that they're being laid off.
Well, along that line,
Yeah.
and I'll give you personal experience.
Yeah.
I knew a layoff was coming a month in advance.
Yeah.
And you got to go into planning meetings with your team members, and they're talking about all the cool stuff they're going to do. And you're looking in the room and the people who are going to be let go.
Right.
And how that eats you.
Yeah.
You're popping the antacids. You're finding yourself being very unhealthy. And at that time, and this about my history, that was about the time I had my stroke.
Mm-hmm.
So I could tell you that, yes, it does. And
yeah. And so that was part of my role. I was managing the career counselors in these outplacement centers and then, of course, working with the people that they were counseling. And then I was also then working with managers and leaders in the organizations to coach them through that process. And the people that we didn't work with, which I think probably needed it still, were the folks who were not laid off but were left behind, like you said, with the same amount of work to do and having lost some of the institutional memory that they had maybe relied on to have, with the survivor guilt of why them and not me, because these decisions are almost never made on, oh, you're a low performer, that's why you're the one who's going. It is more generally things completely outside of an individual's control. And their performance, whatever, they may be laid off for some completely other reason, just because there needed to be X number from some certain group or whatever. And yeah, it's a very broad impact. And that loss of institutional memory is not trivial. And so I think about it. It may not be any comfort to somebody who is recently laid off. I will say that. But for the folks who went through and mine was not remarkably different from any of the other outplacement centers, by far the vast majority of people reported a month, 6 weeks, 2 years later, whatever, that they had ended up in a better place, that it had given them the opportunity to step back and make a choice about what it was they really wanted to do with their lives. And some people went back to school. Some people started small business. Some people found other employment opportunities in new industries or in similar industries where they felt they could use some of that institutional memory and expertise that they had. For all kinds of different reasons, it really gave people an opportunity to step back and take a look at, what are my strengths? What are my skills? Where do I want to go next? And so that's one thing that I would suggest for folks. If you're impacted by a layoff, if you're one of the people who's laid off, take it as an opportunity for reevaluation. Do a personal retrospective. And what would improve your life? Looking back over all your experiences, what would improve your life? How does that give you guidance on where you want to go next? And take some time for that reflection. Don't feel like you have to just rush right into finding the next thing, because you're likely to do the out of the frying pan into the fire thing there. But take some time. I see Gigi is putting some things in the chat about what are some good things that you can do to help yourself with that. For managers and leaders who are having to have these conversations, I would say take some time to reflect on that. Make sure you've got a support system so that that will help you manage your stress. Understand that this is going to be stressful to have this whole bunch of conversations. And there's a definitely skill set to that. So you can probably reach out to somebody and get help with how do you have those conversations in the best possible way for yourself and for the person who's being laid off. And then for the people who stay, it's a huge organizational change. People that you've been working with aren't going to be there anymore. All kinds of other changes and people moving around might be happening. And one of the mnemonics that I learned way back then, that's always served me well in all the change things that I've done before or done since, is a mnemonic called SIS, sort of SOS, only slightly different. And it's support, information, and structure. What support do you need? And look around for that. And if the organization hasn't told you about it, then band together with some other people at your level of the organization and create your own support system. Or if you are a religious person, you might want to speak with your religious leader. You might want to speak with because it's more than just a job thing, right? It's a human thing. And then information, make sure you're seeking out the information you need to be able to do the same job with fewer people now, and know what it is you're looking for, and know that sometimes the answers you're going to get sincerely and truthfully is we don't know yet, and build the strength that you need to be able to deal with that answer. And be able to ask the question, when do you think I can come back to you to find out? When do you think you're going to make this decision? That sort of thing. And then finally, structure. Make sure you if you're not being given a structure, make sure you create your own structure for how you're going to do the work now differently with many of your peers gone. And that if you focus on those three things, the support, what information you need, and then the structure, SIS, can be hugely helpful in moving forward. And as Christopher mentioned in the webinar chat, I was employed by DBM to do the outplacement centers. And I know they've moved now to a much more online system, but we used to meet in person to help people. So that's all. I'll stop there, Ray.
No, I think those are all great advice. I really appreciate it. And especially what you're saying about the people that are still there. And I love give yourself some structure. I think that's really well said. Gigi, I just activated your microphone. I think it's Gigi. You had some cool things that you said in the chat line. Did you want to go over those? Do you mind?
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. So I was one that ended up getting laid off, and it was tough. With IBM, one of the things that they did, though, they gave me a package for success. It was my opportunity to really take advantage of it or not. And for the first couple to 3 weeks, man, I didn't do anything except for process the situation. But I did end up getting a career coach, and I did pay someone to update the resume. And that was one of the best things that I ever did, because that's the first thing that really gets you in the door, your resume there. How do you stand out? With the career coach, man, they told me different ways of updating my LinkedIn and really trying to be noticeable. And I couldn't have done it without all the support. There was no way. But my new job was to find a job. And so every day I would go down and sit at my desk for a good 6 hours and do different things. There were times that I had my note cards out and I'd go for a walk trying to rehearse the interview questions, any of it. And then, of course, I was asked to go network. And that was a love-hate relationship, putting yourself out there in front of people. It was the hardest thing, but that's where I got my job, truly. I met so many people networking. One friend connected me with someone who's just great at introducing me to everyone at this event. And I got to show up to them. And it was crazy to have the support. I've just never had that before. I thought I was out on my own, but having that network and actually getting to know people, it was great. It's really hard though. I hate talking in front of people and so forth, but yeah.
What I find is, again, when I was opening the call, the Agile community is probably one of the best for networking, because I think there is a lot of friendly people out here that are really willing to stick their neck out and connect you to people and other things. And your advice is absolutely outstanding. I really appreciate that. So you got a job now and you're doing good?
I am. And believe it or not, I'm on the other side now because I am a leader and they are softening the amount of individuals we have with the company. One of the things that I do is I really try as a manager to equip individuals to prepare. If I know something, I will just say, let's update your resume. Just be prepared. We all know the business is in a situation. So you and me both, let's do it. I'll help you out to some extent when I do. And then I make sure that I'm helping them and coaching them along the way so that they know where they can improve or really stand out again to get a job or get opportunities. And it's going to be hard, but again, it's the same advice. But while I have them on the job, I challenge them to grow so that they can stand out.
I'd work for you in a heartbeat. Thank you so much for your comments. Sheila McGrath, what do you have on this?
So far, we've talked about the impact on the people that are let go, but there's also an impact on the people that are not. It is true that a lot of times the way they choose who gets laid off is something like, we have to cover this amount of budget because our budget's been cut this amount. And therefore, they may be laying people off, not based on whether their skill set is still necessary, not based on whether they have any specific unique knowledge, but just, we got to hit this number. So then the people that are left may find that there are gaps where there's nobody to do a process. In one company, I didn't work for them at the time, but I heard that they laid off a whole department. And the department was key to the process for any project. So all of a sudden they get to this point in the process and they're supposed to go get approvals. This was a group that was gatekeepers for certain functions. The gatekeepers are gone, but you're not allowed to proceed without going through this gate. And nobody really thought that through before the layoff. So there are bound to be things like that. That's an extreme example that you're going to have to look at. The other thing is, if the people were let go, did people actually expand the amount of work in order to fill the time? Or are there things that could be, that don't really need to be done, that are lower priority, that could just, let's wait and see if anybody notices? Like, I've worked in companies where I've had friends who would do things like turn off a bunch of reports and see if anybody noticed they weren't getting the reports. Because sometimes they're just producing them because they've been producing them and nobody's really looking at them anymore. But other times there's something that's critical to the business that nobody's really thought through. And it doesn't matter where you are in the organization. If you're going to be impacted, you can always identify what's going to impact you and start asking questions, because your management, what you were saying, Ray, may be going through so much stress themselves that they're not really focused on the detail. They're just focused on, how do I get through laying these people off, and not really thinking through as much as how this is going to change the way the business process works. But if you don't, you're likely to inherit somebody else's work without giving up any of your own. And are there enough hours in the day? Or are you going to have to cut back on how much you do on certain tasks, and just, maybe you've been trying to get it to as close to 100% as you could. Now, I've worked in financial services, and There is no such thing as a minor issue. If it's wrong and it's going out to investors and it's being relied upon for financial decisions, even a small discrepancy can cause concern and impact the company's reputation. But in other kinds of companies where I've worked, it's 80% right, close enough. We can ship it, or we can do whatever it is we're going to do. We can move on to the next thing. And that's going to depend on the industry you're in, and a lot of times even where you are in that industry as far as what's acceptable. But those are things you have to consider if you're one of the people that's staying, in terms of how do I do my job? Oh, and if you're staying and they've changed the organization, are they restructuring? Are you suddenly working in a new job? I've seen times where they did a reorg where they laid people off and they changed everybody else's titles. That's some of the times that I've seen where people suddenly went from being trying to think what the titles were. Anyway, they've suddenly become Agile product owners without having any training in Agile, because that was the title that they decided they were going to go with after the reorg. So if someone's in that kind of a position where whatever the title is it well defined? Do you understand what the role is? Do you need training? Can you go and ask somebody if there's training available? Maybe the whole organization needs to go through some kind of discussion or training about how is this going to work now that we've got different people doing different things. I was going to put into the chat, and I will after I finish talking. One organization I've worked with that's local to me is called Career Network Ministry. They have all kinds of stuff online and in person, but about half of it's online. And I've been in meetings with people who were in other parts of the world who were taking advantage of some of the resources. Like they do something every week. They do a couple of virtual sessions every week on what's changed in LinkedIn, because it changes so fast. I know now there's more emphasis on things like having your resume reviewed by AI and making changes to it. You got to watch it, anything with AI, because it'll make stuff up. So you can't just assume that just because it did it, that it's right.
There was a good meme that was just put up a couple days ago, and it was like, nobody's going to be able to check if you were a regional manager at Radio Shack or Circuit City.
Yeah, I've been in some of I'm not those companies, but I've been in companies where the company ceased to exist, or the company still existed, but nobody that I've worked with was still there. Depending on what you're going for, if they can't check, if you need how closely, like I know friends of mine who needed security clearances, you had to find somebody to vouch for you that you had actually worked there at that time and could talk knowledgeably about what you'd done, or you were eliminated from consideration for a job that you were quite well qualified to do. So sometimes you have to go back, and depends on how far back you have to go. Sometimes you have to go back 15 years. Sometimes it's only 5 for the background checks.
Mm-hmm.
And you basically have to find someone who, or several people who can talk to what you were doing and that are reachable and willing to speak.
That sounds really difficult.
Yeah, but it's, in a lot of industries, it's a necessity. If you can't do that, you're going to go through the process, get the job offer, and not pass the background check.
So that's another reason good advice is to make sure that you make notes and get personal email addresses for people, which I think would probably be critical.
Yeah, and it's a good reason to maintain your network, to keep in touch with people. I know I'm very bad at it, but I know what you're supposed to do is to reach out and just have a brief conversation every few months with people that are part of your network, to find out what they've been doing, to talk about what you've been doing, just to maintain that contact, so that if something has changed, like you're not telling somebody that, oh, so-and-so works at Radio Shack. Well, not anymore.
Thank you for that. Cheryl, you had your hand up. Did you have a comment on this?
I'm Cheryl, and I'm from Jamaica, but I also live in Florida as well. And as an Agile coach and head of the Agile PMO in the bank, one of the largest banks in Jamaica, where I worked for almost 15 years, one of the things I instituted, because of the uncertainty in the financial industry, banking in particular, is a personal development plan. So with my Agile coaches and the managers of the teams, I instituted that. It's simple. It's about doing a SWOT analysis on yourself. It looks at, so you identify your gaps and your opportunities, and you create an action plan. And I said to them, do something that starts within 3 months to a year at the start. They work that through with their managers. It could be about training. It could be upskilling, learning something different in the organization, maybe shadowing somebody else, just to up their skills so that if redundancy comes, you at least have a base plan that you can use as a springboard along with networking, as mentioned earlier, that can help them along. So I instituted that, did not make it mandatory, but for those who took the opportunity and followed through, and a few were made redundant last year, they were able to start with a plan in hand, and along with networking, etc., the pain was a little less because they were not caught flat-footed. So that is something I would recommend that we think of while we're in the jobs.
That's very good advice. And I think that, when you think about your own personal development plan, I think that it wrappers in two segments. One is, and I think there's the impact, especially when you get laid off, is you also have, well, what's the impact to my family? And think about how that, factors into your planning as well. What are the ways that, as you're looking for a new position, knowing those strengths and being able to, I think, be able to just say them was just important. Thank you for that comment. I really appreciate that. Scott, how are you?
Great. How are you?
Oh, I had my computer blow up in the beginning of the week. I'm lucky that we're having a podcast today. I have a brand new crisp Windows operating system with no applications except for Zoom right now.
Don't change it. Maybe Zoom will keep working for you just fine.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was just thinking, when everybody was talking, in 2009, I was laid off from Fidelity at the beginning of the Great Recession. And I remembered, I was actually scared that it was the first time I had been laid off. I didn't know what to expect. I'm like, how am I going to pay the bills and all of that? And I went home and I talked to my wife, and the next day I got up and I'm like, I need a quick win. And the first thing I did was I went down to Planet Fitness and got a gym membership. And I started working out every day. And I'm like, I'm going to get myself in better shape. I'm going to start feeling better physically. Hopefully that'll help my mental attitude. And then I started reaching out to folks and just trying to have those conversations. And I'm not great with that either, but I just decided I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to start reaching out to folks, and the folks that are willing to, talk to me, then I'll have a conversation. And I found it was really a reaffirmation of, for me, humanity, in my opinion, because I found out there were a lot of great people out there, and they were willing to help with whatever they could do and whatever advice they could give. And it wound up turning into a positive experience as I went on to teach college courses and coach college soccer for about 3 years before I re-entered the workforce as a project manager and then onto my Agile journey. And a couple of years into that journey, I'll never forget this. My youngest daughter came up to me and she's, I've never seen you look happier in your entire life. And it still resonates with me today. I'll never forget it. And I still don't know if I agree with her, but from her perspective, she thought that I really was enjoying what I was doing. And I certainly wasn't making anywhere near the money, but I certainly was enjoying doing it. And that gave me a lot of power coming back into the workforce to know I could reinvent myself. And when I came back into the workforce as a project manager, I was coming back in from a position of power as far as I know I can reinvent myself if I need to. And I know that I'm here because I want to be here, not because I have to be here. And over these years, I've had contracts ended, I've been laid off. And now after going through all of that, if I get laid off now, I don't even think about it. It's on to the next opportunity. And it was tough going through at the time and it was scary going through it, but I think it's helped me turn me into who I am today. It's part of my experience.
That's awesome. I'm curious that did the gym membership, did that help to just reduce the stress, or did that also just give you that kind of place to think?
I looked at it at the time as you have positive stress, which is eustress, and negative stress, which is distress. And so the gym was some place to go get some positive stress. And I did. I got in better shape. I lost some weight. I felt better about myself. It actually translated well into coaching soccer at the time. So being more physically fit as a coach is always helpful. Yeah, it was just something to get myself feeling better about myself without waiting to get that new job, which turned out to be in this world. It was 3 years before I went back into I guess what I call the regular workforce.
Thank you for that. That's an excellent story. I appreciate you sharing that. Reza, am I pronouncing that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Hey.
Yeah. Hello.
Hey, thank you. So like always, I'm enjoying this calls. So I have some opinion about this. I think as agile coaches in the whole agile community, our job was making ourselves irrelevant. And then actually it was very interesting that a lot of us surprised when that actually the wave started happening. One thing I was telling all the team members in my team when I was like managing a lot of agile coaches and scrum masters was, you're making yourself irrelevant. You should choose to stay within the company. And then if you want to leave, if the company don't need your value anymore, you need to be able to find the next job. And interestingly, during the time I was with the company, whoever left afterward, we were friends, although I was in charge of making that decision a lot of times. And then afterward, everyone got another job. And then we tried to do that with the teams as well. So not essentially after a layoff trying to do that, during the work we do with the team, making sure anyone who might decide to leave the job leaves for a better job later, even if it's an engineer or someone. And then if they are leaving the company, they have enough, like a skill set, they had progressed enough so they can find a good job afterwards. That sounds a little bit cliche, but I think that's should have been there. And then one other thing, as an agile community, we were trying to bring it to ourselves. So I know it's getting slow a little bit on the agile coaching and the scrum master jobs, but either we did a really good job in making ourselves relevant to companies, or we were not able to show the value that we were adding to the companies. And I started my entrepreneurship journey a couple of years ago. And what I found is it might be the second one, because when you're an entrepreneur, you're pitching to any investor, anyone, you need to be very concise, very brief, and then sell your idea to people. Whereas agile coaches, I've seen a lot of coaches and scrum masters who ramble a lot when they are introducing something, and the teams are usually resistant to that because you're disrupting the teams. I think that was a point that we have to go back and look at if we want to continue bring the agile community back again rising. So that's my opinion. It might be a little bit strong.
No, I think your opinion was spot on in a few areas. I'm curious, as you went in and you decided to now start pitching ideas and selling yourself in a lot of regards, selling who you are and why should we invest in you. What are one of the key things that you learned that made that easier to do?
So one is like everyone has heard of an elevator pitch. One thing that is very important, you should be able to say what you want to say in less than 30 seconds in an elevator. And the other one is networking. I think somebody else actually mentioned networking. And interestingly, a lot of people think adult coaches should be extroverts. We are not, a lot of us. And going out there and networking is hard. There is a book about networking for introvert people, and it gives great ideas. So I started learning that a lot. And I found that we've always said in our leadership approaches, assume everyone has talent and everyone has their own talent and they know their work. When you go to networking, you see everyone with different talents, completely a lot more diverse than the software industry where you just see certain talents. And that was really opening my eyes that I see someone, I understand they have their talents and they are valuable on their own. So that's one of the things I learned a lot. But the main thing is the networking, finding out how to network to people. And when you're saying something, you have only less than a minute to keep their interest and move on. say the most important thing, keep them curious, and then continue on that.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Dr. Talasi.
My few takes is that the company you and I worked before and also later also announced layoffs. And my team has just escaped the layoff this time. But some pointers I can give here in this forum is that so the meetings outside, like any kind of events you can attend and have networking, it'll be great. It'll be great. It'll help greatly. The other thing is to find out your skill level. There's a platform called Free Word Cloud. I think you probably noticed that. You guys probably seen this or used it before. So if you upload your resume, the text form or whatever form, if they give you a picture of a cloud, what is stand out? How your resume being perceived? And it's basically very simple math. It's look at the number of occurrence of the word, and then it will put out a big, what is happening more, what occurrences are more happening, it will put out a big thing. For example, it will probably come up, the directorship is a bigger font, and then validation is next font, things like that. So then resume, when you can actually tweak your resume based on your role you're applying. If it is if you are applying for some management roles, and make sure that the management is stands out, or directorship or vice president or even individual contributor role. What you want that at least give you one data point to see this is how your resume being perceived outside. The other thing I would say is put more LinkedIn short presentations or write-ups, which gives you some traction. Okay, this person is here. You can use him whatever form it can be. Give more familiarity with the rest of the world, not just your company. So you have to now have more relationship with the outside of the company and make sure you are being heard and advertised and things like that. And so those are the things I would say, it'll help. And reach out to all your contacts, whether you're, your next door neighbor, son or daughter, maybe in a company. Nowadays, I find it the empathy factor is very low in America. So you have to ask them. They are working for Google as a manager. You just tell them, oh, there is a layoff happening. They won't say anything. Then you have to ask them, hey, can you help me very specifically? And then you have some track.
Thank you. That's all great advice. I appreciate it. There was a comment in the chat line here, Lori. You had mentioned something, and I just activated your microphone, Lori. Did you want to give a little bit of contrast on holding leaders accountable? I'm curious. Is that what you're thinking about in that perspective?
What I'm hearing about, and there's been quite a bit of thought and discussion that I've had going on around me, not only at my company, but some other companies where I know people. I've been in the agile and project management space for 25, 30 years. So I have a lot of contacts, and just hearing from people that the way these layoffs tend to go is very undercover. All of a sudden, people are being handed the proverbial pink slip and they're out the door. There's no discussion about it. There's one company in particular where hundreds of people were laid off in like 3-month period, and leaders said nothing about it. Nothing. There was no discussion. There was very little involvement, even with HR, not being communicative, not being there to support people as they're being laid off. And the people who are watching all this go on are just a mess. They're completely emotionally a mess. And you've got people needing to go on medication because they're so full of anxiety. And it really pisses me off to see that these leaders are not being held accountable for what they're doing to people.
Yeah, I do not disagree with, again, my own personal situation of where we've had layoffs where literally somebody told me as a manager that it was going to happen today. And I'm not sure what's worse, that situation or the situation where you know for a few weeks. And or you might not know the name. They'll say, okay, we're coming up with the criteria to that. And then the last component is for companies that are doing layoffs, I believe that there's a role, whether you get an outside consulting firm or somebody else to come in to help your HR teams, making sure that people understand the support networks that they can connect to. So I fully agree with that. Thank you for that. Lisa, we're getting close to the top of the hour. What do you have?
So when you are searching for your next role, when you're networking with your contacts, they want to help you. But one thing that will help them help you is to be specific. So doing a little research up front, thinking about the industries or the size of companies you want to work at and for is helpful. Come up with a short list of your targeted companies. And if you can say, who do you know at this company? It gives them a much easier way to help you. And they may not know somebody, but they may say, my next door neighbor works for them. Or I have a networking contact in LinkedIn who is there. Let me connect you to them. So the more you can target what you're looking for, it makes it easier for others who really do want to help you to be able to help you.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Sheila, you had your hand up. You want to take us home? What do you got?
Yeah, the title of this included organizational change management. We haven't talked as much about that specifically. We talked around it.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we're with a couple minutes left, I think we'll probably have to save that into a future call.
But I do want to say something about it. And that
Please.
is, I did mention a little bit about how the jobs will change. But the other thing is, from the perspective of the person who's laid off and from the person who is staying, look and see what are the buzzwords that people are talking about now? What is the direction we're going? I've been told that sometimes I need to change my resume, not the description so much as maybe I need to change the title, or maybe even though what I was doing was agile, maybe I need to put in the part that wasn't agile, because there's invariably a piece that isn't. And emphasize that because it's the person who can work with the traditional SDLC and can also work within agile frameworks is going to have an advantage in organizations that are changing. The other thing is it might be DevOps, or they may have decided they can get rid of a lot of people in IT because they're going to use AI, and that's going to replace all these programmers because it's going to do things in a day that took months to do before. So it changes job descriptions and job titles, and it changes the way you go, what you emphasize of the many things that you've done, because anybody's resume is not going to say everything that they've done, and certainly not in any detail.
Right.
But what you want to say are the things that are going to get someone's attention, where you can get your foot in the door to talk to them about what you can do for them. And I think that's important to consider in looking at your resume and your cover letters or whatever other things you're doing. And we talked about things like the little videos that you can put in or demos that you can attach to your LinkedIn profile now. Those things fall in and out of favor too. What was considered very cutting edge a year ago might be considered, people are jaded about it. It may not have the same impact. You need to keep going back to look to see what is it that is getting people's attention now. I think that's what I wanted to say about that today.
Okay. Appreciate that. And I appreciate all the comments and we had a very lively chat session today too, as well. I'd like to thank all of my hosts who join me every month. We couldn't do this whole podcast without you. I appreciate that. And everyone who's contributed on the call today, thank you so much. Just a reminder on a couple different things. The Season of Learning, New Agility, we have a couple of classes right now that are online learning classes that are free right now. And they're going to be free until the end of September. We have the Guide to Upholding Agile Principles, and as well as the Agile Values and Culture class. Those things are free right now. You can go to newagility.com, join those. They will then become just for supporting members or fee services after we get to the end of September. But we wanted to make it a good season of learning, whether or not you're in summer or you're in the winter, depending on what side of the planet you're on. These classes are available for you. Lastly, the next live event recording will be on September 27th. And again, reminder, go over, take a look at our sponsors, let them know, give them some love, join the Agile Alliance, become a supporting member, go also with all of our rest of our supporting people that are out there. We love you. We're glad that you were able to give us the financial capability of being able to bring on the show. And so with that, I'd like to say, I hope you all have a tremendous month. The ACN podcast is for educational and informative use only. If you'd like to know more about the ACN community, please come up to acnpodcast.org and support our show.